You didn't have a traumatic childhood, no one hit you, nothing dramatic happened. But somewhere along the way, you started shrinking yourself in rooms full of people. You started saying sorry for things that weren't your fault. You started believing that love was something you had to earn, and you never understood why. This video is the answer. Today we're covering the 7 core childhood wounds, the invisible injuries that most people carry silently into their adult lives without ever realizing they have them. By the end of this, something is going to click, and for a lot of you, it's going to explain almost everything. We'll cover all 7, but stay until the last one, because it's the wound that came disguised as love, and it might be the most quietly destructive of them all. Let's start at the beginning. Wound number 1, the abandonment wound. You're 7 years old. A parent leaves. Maybe physically, they walked out, and the calls got less frequent until they stopped altogether. Maybe emotionally, they were home every night but never really there, always distracted, always somewhere else in their head. Your 7-year-old brain doesn't understand adult problems. It only understands one thing. The person I need most keeps disappearing. That must mean something is wrong with me. That conclusion doesn't disappear when you grow up. It goes underground. And here's what nobody tells you about the abandonment wound. The real damage isn't the leaving itself. The real damage is what you do to prevent it from happening again. As an adult, you fall fast and hard in relationships, then spend every quiet moment waiting for them to end. A delayed text makes your stomach drop. A slightly cold tone sends your mind spiraling for hours. You replay the conversation. You search for the moment you said something wrong. You either hold on so tightly that you push people away, or you leave first before they get the chance. You call it independence. Other people call it distance. But underneath both is the same 7-year-old logic. If I leave first, it can't hurt as much. The abandonment wound doesn't make you needy. It makes you someone who learned very early that love can disappear without warning, and your nervous system has been quietly preparing for that loss ever since. Wound number 2, the rejection wound. When was the last time you had a good idea and kept it completely to yourself? Didn't raise your hand? Didn't send the message? Didn't apply? Just quietly buried it before anyone else could see it? If your answer is recently, this wound might be yours. The rejection wound rarely comes from one dramatic moment. It comes from a pattern. Being the kid whose ideas got laughed at. Hearing "you're too sensitive" every time you felt something. Being overlooked so consistently that you eventually stopped raising your hand. Not because you stopped having answers, but because the risk stopped feeling worth it. Over time, your brain built one simple rule. Showing the real me equals pain. So you learned to hide. As an adult, the rejection wound doesn't just make you afraid of other people. It makes you abandon your own opportunities before they ever have a chance. You edit yourself before anyone asks you to. You talk yourself out of things using other people's imagined voices. But here's the irony. You became so skilled at protecting yourself from rejection that you learned to reject yourself first. You dismiss your own ideas before anyone else can. You shrink before anyone asks you to. You disappear and then feel lonely for it. The rejection wound didn't make you weak. It made you extraordinarily careful. But careful doesn't get you the life you actually want. It just makes the waiting feel safer. Wound number 3. The humiliation wound. You made a mistake as a child, something small. You cried when you weren't supposed to. You failed something in front of others. You said the wrong thing at the wrong moment. And instead of someone helping you through it, they laughed. They shamed you. They made sure you understood exactly how foolish you looked. Here's something most people don't know about shame. It lives in the body differently than other emotions. Fear spikes and fades. Sadness moves through you. But shame lodges. Even reading this right now, if a specific memory surfaced,
Your chest probably tightened. Your face might have gotten warm. Your shoulders may have pulled inward without you deciding to move them. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system still protecting the child who got hurt. As an adult, the humiliation wound becomes a brutal inner critic, a voice that attacks you faster and harder than anyone else ever could. You make one small mistake at work. Before anyone says a word, your brain has already begun a full prosecution.
You're incompetent. Everyone saw. You'll never live this down. The outer mistake lasts a minute. The internal trial lasts days. You over-explain. You over-apologize. You rehearse conversations before they happen, running every version of how you could be embarrassed so you can prevent it before it starts. And when someone criticizes you, even gently, it doesn't land as feedback. It lands as confirmation. People will tell you that you're too hard on yourself, but this internal cruelty wasn't something you chose. It was installed by someone who should have protected you. The most painful part of the humiliation wound is this: the person who shamed you has probably forgotten it completely. And you haven't stopped hearing their voice since. The first 3 wounds came from being hurt. The next one comes from a home that never felt safe enough to be human in. And that's exactly what makes it so hard to see. Wound number 4. The injustice wound. You bring home a 95 on a test. The first question is, where did the other 5% go? No celebration, no acknowledgement, just the gap between what you did and what was expected. That scene, or some version of it, repeated itself throughout your childhood in a home that was cold, rigid, or quietly impossible to satisfy. Rules that changed without explanation. Approval that only arrived when you performed. Being expected to hold yourself together while the adults around you didn't. A parent who gave affection like a reward and withheld it like a punishment. Nobody hit you, nobody left, but something was communicated over and over in 100 small moments. Your feelings are an inconvenience here. Just be good, just perform. So you did. As an adult, the injustice wound produces some of the most capable, disciplined people in the world. You set standards nobody else can meet. You work twice as hard as everyone around you. You never ask for help. Not because you don't need it, but because needing things feels dangerously close to being a burden. What nobody talks about is what all that performance is actually running on. Underneath the competence is a quiet, simmering anger. At hypocrites. At systems that reward the wrong people. At yourself when you fall short of the impossible bar you set. You say yes when you mean no, then build slow, silent resentment toward the people you said it to. It looked like strength. It was also exhaustion. What that child needed, and what part of you is still waiting to hear, is this: you don't have to earn your place here. You already belong. Wound number 5. The betrayal wound. Someone who was supposed to protect you chose not to. A parent who promised and never delivered. A caregiver who took someone else's side. Someone who took your secret and made it public. Someone who looked directly at you and lied. And you believed them because you were a child, and you had no reason not to. Betrayal from a stranger is painful. You recover, you adjust, you move on. But betrayal from someone you loved and depended on as a child doesn't just hurt. It rewrites the operating system. The conclusion your young brain reached wasn't just, that person hurt me. It was, if the person who was supposed to love me most could do this, then I can never fully trust anyone. And so you built an insurance policy. As an adult, the betrayal wound creates a paradox that is exhausting to live inside. You want deep, close relationships more than almost anything, but the moment one gets close enough to matter, something in you starts looking for the exit. You test people, sometimes consciously, often not. You hold a piece of yourself back, always, as a reserve. You find small reasons to be suspicious. When someone lets you down, even slightly, even accidentally, it doesn't register as a disappointment. It registers as proof. Loyalty becomes the most sacred thing in your world because it's the thing that was taken from you first. But here is what the betrayal wound is really protecting you from. It doesn't make you afraid of being hurt. It makes you terrified of discovering you were wrong to trust again. Wound number 6. The neglect wound. Have you ever tried to explain why you're struggling and found that you genuinely couldn't? Not because nothing happened, but because nothing happened. And somehow, that felt harder to justify than if something had. The neglect wound is the one most people don't recognize until well into adulthood, because there's no incident to point to, no moment, just a long, quiet absence. Your physical needs were met, but nobody ever sat across from you and asked how you were really doing. Nobody helped you name what you were feeling. Nobody noticed when something was quietly wrong. And here's what makes this wound genuinely surprising. You feel guilty calling it a wound at all. Other people had it so much worse. What right do I have? But a child who is never truly seen doesn't conclude, "My parents were struggling." A child concludes, "I am not worth paying attention to." That belief, quiet, almost invisible, becomes the architecture of everything. You become radically self-sufficient because you learned early that asking for help was pointless. You take care of everyone around you effortlessly and feel quietly uncomfortable when anyone tries to return it. Your chest tightens when someone asks if you're okay. You say, "I'm fine," so automatically that sometimes you don't realize you're not. The real problem isn't that you can't feel. It's that you were never given a language for what you feel. You have spent your entire life being fluent in other people's emotions and a near stranger to your own. You are not too much. You were just never shown that you were enough. Wound number 7. The enmeshment wound. Every wound we've covered so far came from something being taken away. Love, safety, fairness, attention, trust. This last one is different. This one came wrapped in love. Genuine, devoted, overwhelming love. From a parent who needed you just as much as you needed them. And that's what made it almost impossible to see. Enmeshment happens when the line between parent and child quietly disappears. When a child is made responsible for their parent's emotional world without either of them fully realizing it's happening. It sounds like, "You're the only one who really understands me. I don't know what I'd do without you. Don't tell your father, this stays between us. After everything I've sacrificed for you." You became their confidant before you were old enough to have your own problems. You learned to read their emotional temperature the moment you walked into a room, scanning, calculating, adjusting yourself before anyone asked. You got very good at it. Here is the insight that most people with this wound never hear. You didn't lose your childhood to cruelty. You gave it away trying to hold someone else together. As an adult, the enmeshment wound doesn't look like damage. It looks like devotion. People love being around you because you are extraordinarily attuned to how they feel. You notice things. You anticipate things. You give in ways that leave people feeling genuinely seen. But underneath that attunement is something nobody sees. You feel responsible for the emotional state of every person in your vicinity. When someone goes quiet, your stomach tightens. When someone is upset, you cannot rest until it's resolved. Disappointing someone doesn't feel like social discomfort, it feels like danger. And the deepest cost, the one that takes the longest to see, you have spent so long tuned to everyone else that you have almost no idea what you actually want. Not because you're selfless, because you were never given the space to find out. Here is what makes this wound the hardest to heal. The person who caused it loved you, genuinely, and some part of you knows that, which means healing doesn't feel like breaking free from something bad. It feels like betraying someone who loved you. It isn't, but it feels that way. And that guilt, wrapped around a boundary you haven't set yet, is the wound still doing its job. You are allowed to love someone fully and still build a life that belongs entirely to you. Here is something nobody tells you about childhood wounds. They were never signs that something was wrong with you. They were proof that something was wrong around you, and that you were smart enough, adaptive enough, and resilient enough to survive it. Every behavior we covered today, the clinging, the hiding, the performing, the overgiving, the hypervigilance, was originally a solution, a good one. It worked. It got you through. The problem isn't that you developed these responses. The problem is that the situation requiring them is over, and your nervous system didn't get the memo. You are still running survival code in a life that no longer requires surviving. Healing isn't about going back and fixing what happened. It's about updating the belief that grew out of it. Not people leave, but some people stay. Not showing myself is dangerous, but the right people are safe. Not I have to earn love, but I am allowed to simply receive it. Those updates don't happen overnight, but they happen. You are not broken. You are not your wound. You are what survived it. Which of these 7 wounds felt the most familiar? In your own life or in someone you love? Tell me in the comments. Be as specific as you want. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today, to realize they are not making it up, and they are not alone. If you want videos that explain how the human mind actually works, honestly, clearly, without judgment, subscribe.